And hello and welcome to everybody. I don't know if people can actually hear me. Oh no, it's working. Okay. I was trying to see if everything worked. Hi guys, welcome to today's show of GTS Stories. It's a brand new little segment thing that I brought back. And I'm here with my friend Ryan Lau. How are you, Ryan?
Great to be back here, Jess.
Nice. No, so we are so this is going to be a little segment that I'm going to be bringing back. It's not going to be every Friday or every other Friday. It's going to be every once in a while that I'm going to have another guest come back or a new guest come in so we can talk a little bit about their work and everything that they've done. And as always, you guys know that Ryan is my absolute favorite in the hobby. So always having him on. It's a pleasure, Ryan. Seriously. I kind of want to.
Pleasure is mine.
I kind of wanted to ask how you've been and what have you been up to these last couple of months since we've talked, because it's been a long time.
Yeah, more like the last couple years, I feel.
yeah, and catching up. Yeah, it's been a while.
But no, yeah, I mean, it's things have been going well. I think the last the last year or so, last 2 years, it's been life's been good. In terms of the modeling side of things, it's been really fun. I've been able to find more time to kind of work on smaller projects,
right?
And which I've really enjoyed, because I feel like the last we'll be talking about some of these later on tonight, but it's been fun experimenting different things, and taking slight risks here and there, and it's been really fun in terms of that. And I feel like I've been able to find and hone my skills a little bit more, and but I'm still learning.
Always.
It's never gonna be at the final goal level. So it's been really fun, actually, just working on different projects. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great to hear. It's awesome to hear you still say I'm still learning. I remember the first few conversations you and I ever had a long time ago. I was like, man, you're a master. You're like, no, I'm still learning. And it's one of those mantras that you've always kept, and I really appreciate that you're still with that mindset. It's really it's admirable, really. I want to say hi to everybody in the chat. Mercenary, Lawrence, my wife, my mom. Hi, Mom. Barbone is there, and thank you, James Otaku Builder, for the $10. That is awesome. I appreciate that a lot. Congrats to you and the missus again for becoming parents. You guys are going to be amazing parents. So it's awesome to have you guys here. Anyway, Ryan, without any further ado, let's not beat around the bush. Just kind of head on over. Oh, wait a second, real quick. Today's show is brought to you by USAGUNDAMSTORE. They are holding their President's Day sale over in the US right now. You can head on over and use, I think it's PRES 15 to save 15% on, I think, store wide. So go and check that out. I think it starts tomorrow, if not today. I don't know. But anyway, go check them out. We're going to head on over to the slideshow. If you guys
over there.
If you guys remember the way we used to do this stuff, a little slideshow. Here we are. Look at that. Switched on over.
Nice.
It's fun. You know what? You know what's really fun, Ryan, is being able to do this with the technology that I've been able to acquire over the years. I remember I used to do this like a little laptop camera, just the mic, and now we have all of this.
That's awesome. That's what I'm using right now. A laptop and a and it's still working great.
No, for sure.
Great.
It's more seamless for me 100%. Because I used to have like one screen only, and now I have three, and now everything works, and now I'm able to just kind of focus and not have to worry about is the stream gonna keep working, or is my computer gonna shut off? Anyway, we're going to start off Ryan Lau at Gunpla Enthusiast. If you guys don't know him on his handle, I think that's your same handle on Twitter, right?
Yeah, on Twitter, it's funny. Twitter actually cuts off the last 2 letters. So it's actually at Gunpla Enthusiast.
Enthusiast.
So
nice.
It ends at the IA.
Very boosh.
Yeah. Which I thought had a nice ring to it. So I just kept it that way.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, let's start off with the first one here, which is going to be the RX-783 Exceed Bust. I remember when you posted this up, and you always start off by posting like the finished product, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Like a sneak kind of, peek of it.
Like, this is what
tease.
Yeah. and then voila, boom, here it is. And then
Oh,
afterwards you post a work in progress and people get to see how you got the magic, how the magic is working in the back.
oh,
I had always seen the RX-78 2 bust and the Zaku bust and all of those. Like it's not even an actual bust, it's just the head.
yeah.
And the amount of detail that you were able to cram into this thing, because it's not big by any means, right? It's like,
No. Yeah, it's probably like this. It's probably the size of my like two fists kind of thing,
yeah,
maximum. Yeah.
yeah. So it's not
Yeah.
huge, and I think that's gonna be a topic, a recurring topic during tonight's show with you, is me telling you how were you able to fit so much detail into such a small area. But first off, my question is, what made you want to work on the little head? Like, where did the idea come from? What exactly what was going on through your head?
Very good question. So this piece over here actually started off. This is actually Zach Aurelius was holding on a competition, clean versus weathered build competition, where there would be separated in two different categories. There'd be weathered builds, and then there'd be clean builds. And then you'd have to, of course, for the clean build section, you have to build as cleanly as possible, and then weathered, same thing, right?
Mhm.
And so I wanted to build an entry for it, and they had said basically you can use anything, right? Like anything to do any type of model you wanted to. It didn't have to be Gundam Universe either.
Yeah.
So I always like to think of, when I look at things, I kind of want to build something that maybe has not. I don't want to be like, oh, it's never been done before. Like there's been tons of busts done before, kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I've always wanted to detail up an Exceed head, because
Yeah.
I just thought Exceed heads were probably the coolest things ever.
Mhm.
And so at first I was just going to stop at just, detailing just the Exceed head. But I was like, oh, you know what? It'd be so cool if I could just build a bust for the head as well, too, because it's just so cool. Right.
Right.
And I haven't seen it. Like I've seen busts like built before,
Right.
but never one for the RX-78 Exceed head for this specific one. So then, and then so immediately I was like, okay, I love clean stuff, so I'm going to try to build it as cleanly as possible. And I interpreted the clean aspect of it as in not only in the painting, right, but also in how cleanly I can make these pieces, either scratch building or kit bashing with other parts to
Right.
make it look like it's an actual kit that you can buy, and
Right.
and so every surface or every corner, I didn't want to make it look like, oh, I can tell where the plot plate is, where it starts and where it ends, and oh, I could tell where this piece came from, kind of thing.
Right.
I kind of wanted to, so that's kind of my interpretation. I was like, oh, I might get bonus points if I could build it so cleanly that people will look at it and be like, is this a resin you can buy? Or, oh, where can I buy this, kind of thing, right? Or when they look at the head, they won't be like, oh, that's an Exceed head. It's unrecognizable, right?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my take on this whole kind of journey on participating in the competition.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the goal I set out for myself. The goal, my learning point for this was, try to do a little bit more scratch building, because up until this point, I was not very comfortable with scratch building at all,
Right.
and even attaching parts and stuff like that. So yeah, so that was my main goal for this build here.
For sure. Well, it's good that you talk about scratch building, because you tend to have a lot of work in progress pictures. And in our next slide, I have some of the pictures that you sent over on how you kind of went about panel lining and adding more plot plates, and how you kind of made it work together, which I think is one of the more difficult parts of scratch building. It's something that I've tried. I think is very difficult. I think some people just have this thing that clicks inside of their head that's like, okay, this looks good, or I'm gonna make it look good. And I think you just did that here with the little base. You added plates on here. Could you tell us a little bit about what you were trying to do and how you were able to accomplish it here in these photos that we have up here?
Yeah, exactly. Like this, for this specific one, let me just see. I forgot which. It was one of the. It was this kit. I actually have it here. It was the hard graph, UC hard graph.
Right.
The anti-tank. It was the one with the arm. I don't know if you can see it here.
Yeah.
But it basically has like a Gundam arm, a massive 1/35th scale Gundam arm.
Oh.
Anyways, this neck collar part, like the blue part that you see in the slide, is actually part of like the forearm.
Whoa.
It's like one of these pieces here, like this piece right
Wow.
here.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I, you know, I have a bunch of kits here, you know, that I've taken apart over the years. And
Mhm.
so that's one of my favorite things to do is when I'm thinking of a piece to make, I
Yeah.
like to just dig through all my parts and pieces and everything and just look at what similar shapes I could use. And I remember one time looking at this this specific kit here, this one over here, and I was
Yeah.
like, hey, you know what? Because at first I was going to completely scratch build the entire neck collar area.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, this is a really huge undertaking. It's really hard for me to pull off, right? So
Right. Right.
so then as I was looking at this piece, I was like, hey, this looks exactly like that neck area, except I have to just modify the angle a bit, you know? And then all I need to do is just build a frame around it, and bam, it can be like the RX-78, the classic neck collar that you see, like the yellow part. You know, in this case,
Yeah.
it's the you know, bluish grayish part, right?
Right.
And so, you know, normally this is one of the biggest things I feel for myself, at least, is I like to kind of take note of my skills, what
Yeah.
skills I know. And I know at the point at that present moment, even maybe now, I'm not like the best scratch builder, right? So then that made me kind of try to take pieces that resemble certain things and then
Yeah.
just build a frame around that makes it a little bit more achievable to pull off. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
And so with the plot plate, it's pretty much just like, I think this was a thicker piece of plot plate though. I think this was like a 2 millimeter thick plot plate.
Okay.
I just cut them into pieces and then, you know, using chisels and everything and even smaller pieces, combine it to give it those details on the side there.
Mm-hmm.
And then that made it a little bit more achievable. You can see the next slide here, Jess, and then you can see how I kind of just literally used it as a border
Right.
around that original piece. And that original piece served as kind of like the skeleton or the template of which I would build everything else on top of. And so that made this project, this neck collar, because the entire time I was like, this neck collar, I really have to get right, because
Right.
if I make it too big, too small, or the wrong shape or whatever, it'll tell you immediately, oh, this doesn't look like a normal bust, or this doesn't, you know, it's not convincing, right? So,
Right.
So I feel like this is where I found to be really interesting when you can start taking kit bashing. What's that word they call it? It's like kit bashing plus scratch building. Like I forgot what it's called. Scratch bashing or something, or kit bash. Scratch bashing.
A kit bash.
Kit bash or
Yeah. Kit bash is like when you put a bunch of kits together to make something else.
Or it's like the combination of kit bashing, but with scratch building involved as well too.
Right.
Because like scratch building is where you just build it out of plot plate only, right?
Right.
But this is the combination of using plot plate on top of an existing piece to make it a whole different piece.
Right.
Unique on its own, and then into your model, right? But anyways, scratch bashing. I forgot. Whatever.
Something.
Yeah. But I found that to be very powerful in terms of the skill here.
Right.
And that's something I really learned a lot about on this build. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I think it's just funny the way you say, well, I'm gonna, you know, all I have to do is turn this into a collar and that's it. But kind of gloss over the fact that you have some nice chiseling here, some nice panel lining, some like.
Thank you.
When doing this, was there a reference that you used to look at details that you needed or that you knew needed to exist, you know, on the collar for it to be, as you said, convincing or believable? Like what exactly was your reference? Was it the old pictures? Because I know that you're also like a fan of looking at like line art or things that people have like drawn, right? So
yeah, very good question. So before every build, I always love to do like a whole visual kind of I like to keep different picture albums on my phone. And anytime I see something that's like RX-78 you know, or G3 Gundam G3 related, that's interesting, right? I like to take a screenshot of it. And then that way I have like a photo library of like all these different types, like whether it be all the past different versions that have been released or resin kits or customs. And then I kind of try to take a look at what I really like from those, you know, what makes sense. Like sometimes there's things that really don't make, like panel line designs that really don't make sense, right? Yeah. And then kind of conglomerate them all together and be like, oh, you know what? Like, I think this would look pretty nice as a latch detail. Honestly, I make it look a lot easier on the pictures because it looks like it's a step 1, step 2, step 3, step
Yeah.
4. Like it looks almost as if like I sat down. I'm like, I'm just gonna put this in here, and bam,
Yeah,
I got
yeah.
it. But honestly, like it's a long process. Like I tell a lot of people, it doesn't take much time to execute it, but it take like 95% of the time is in determining the design of it. You know,
Right.
and once you determine the design of it, 5% is in executing it. Now, of course. I don't want to downplay the fact that, yeah, I mean, you have to have some experience in using the chisel and everything like that.
Mhm.
But honestly, with enough practice, you know, I think most people can get a pretty good handle on how to use a chisel, right?
Right.
But I feel like the whole designing aspect of it, is a much harder process to, and I still don't have a full grasp on it.
Right.
But I know, at least for myself, like when I see something, I'm like, I like this, or this
Mhm.
is a nice design. And why is it nice? So I always ask myself, you know, how come this is so cool looking, right?
Mhm.
And so honestly, I draw tons of different pencil versions, and I take pictures of it, and then and then that way I can scroll through a whole pictorial kind of album
Yeah.
of like, okay, what are the designs I like, you know,
Right.
and then go from there. So yeah, most of the time is spent in designing.
Okay,
Yeah.
so designing, looking at the pictures that you've taken, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
good art out there, even just not even like official
Yes.
art that people draw that's very mechanical.
Yes.
I'm even thinking just of Gundam Yatham, who
Yes.
does
Oh, yes.
yeah,
He's a
right.
master.
He's very
Yeah.
much of the bust. I would
Yes.
consider maybe looking at that, but I would love to go into like more detail of the chiseling and panel line, because it's like one of my favorite aspects of like a custom build. But we could sit here for a long time, and
Yes.
I'll probably start asking you selfish questions like, could you teach me how to do the chiseling that you're doing right there on the collar? But no,
Yeah,
we're gonna
yeah,
go
yeah.
on next to what you have here, which is the mock-up with blue tack.
Yes.
And
yes.
I am a lover of blue tack as well. I think it's perfect for the hobby. Just go out, guys, to Staples or to Dollar Store, find some blue tack,
Yes.
and keep it in your hobby box or wherever, because it's gonna help a lot, especially when you're trying to design something. Which is where I'm going here with this question is, since, well, I guess you kind of answered it already. You kind of looked at the design beforehand, and like you spend 90%, right? Let's say, quote unquote, 90%. After you build every individual piece, do you put it together based on that design? Is there a moment where maybe things change that you don't like? Was there a moment like that during this process, like with the bust itself?
Yes, very good question there, Jess. So all I knew from this design is I know how the head looks, I know how the collar's supposed to look, but when it comes to the internal guts, I have zero idea how it looks, you know, because actually even if because I have the line art, the official Bandai line art of the RX series of suits, you know, and
Okay.
that's the mechanical. I forgot the title of that. I gave you the GM version.
I know,
of it,
that's
you
what I'm
know?
thinking of, the
And
magazine
yeah,
one, yeah.
exactly. And so I have the RX version of that, right? And in none of the pictures, to my recollection, did it show the bust like neck down. It would show like the entire chest part, right?
Right.
But it wouldn't show kind of just underneath the neck area. So,
Mhm.
and I know I didn't want the mechanical details to fight with the details of the head,
Mhm.
because if I made like the entire chest, all of a sudden the attention would be away from the head part, you know, it would be looking just at the chest area. So that was like, a lot of times in building, like I like to take a step back too and kind of think about the viewer, like what the viewer will see, you know.
Right.
People who might not be into the Gundam world, like when they look at something, where is their eye being drawn to, right? And so if I made the bust like the entire chest area, I had a running joke with Choco Falcon Dave. I think Dave was like, oh, now that you built this, I'm waiting for the 1/35th scale version of the entire like rest of the suit, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was like, oh dang, that'll take forever to build, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting, right? Because I really wanted to just focus on a tiny part of underneath the head, but not the entire chest, right?
Okay. Okay.
And so because of that, I really had no reference as to how it looks, right? And so it was honestly a lot of like guessing and testing. Like, you know, the near the back area where you have that vented cylindrical part,
Right. Yeah.
you know, and so at first that wasn't going to be sideways like that. It was going to be probably like backwards, like just on the back, like one
Oh.
of them on the back, right?
Okay.
And so and so I was like playing with different orientations, and I was like, oh, I think this would look so cool on the side because you know, it could look like it's like the motor where the arms would attach onto, you know. And then so certain things I would decide first, and then I'd be like, okay, so if that piece is there, now what else can I add in front of it, you know? But I don't want it to detract from that piece, and so I would think of different things that way, you know, and I would want basically a layered approach too. So I didn't want basically just, you know, a flat piece and then just bits stuck onto it and be like, that's my inner frame, right? Like I wanted kind of like a inner frame, and the PGU Unleashed, the PG Unleashed gave me a lot of inspiration actually, because you can see the outer you know, frame, right? Like a different color. As so when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's such a cool detail. I would love that. And that's how I came up with that outer frame part, you know, more forward there, because it just provided such a great detail, right?
Well, that's what I was. Sorry. No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying like that really helps kind of encase the internals, which, and I knew I wanted some type of cord as well too, like something more curvy, right, to contrast against the more rigid rectangular parts or even the circular parts, right? To have some contrast in there, right? So so that frame would help hold it together. If you like, I'm not a mechanical engineer or anything, right? But you know, but I would assume that, you know, for cable management, right, you would want something to kind of brace it. So anyways, it was like one thing after another, right? That kind of added, and there was a lot of testing. Like I said, you know, 90% of it was, does this look good here? Does this look good here? And then kind of go from there.
Okay. Well, it's awesome that you mentioned the RX 78 the PG Unleashed, because when I looked at your pictures originally and I saw the race collar, I went to mine and it has the race collar, and I'm just like, that's why that's honestly, that was why I asked what was the reference, right? Because it really does remind me of that style that the PGU has, even including the part that comes out and then goes down to where the cockpit is, right? Where the
exactly. Like that's the one detail that was my last detail that I added actually, because I was like, at first I didn't have anything in the front, but I was like, I think it would be so cool if I can include just the beginnings of the internal of the door of the latch, you know, the latch
yeah.
Because for those who know the design of the RX, like those are some quintessential, like I'll talk about this later on in some of my builds too, but that's another thing I try to think about is what are the quintessential elements of a piece that makes it an RX 78-2, or in this case a G3, like -3, and so we know that there's that neck collar that's very characteristic of it, right? And we know that there's that latch where the
exactly.
you know, chest part pops out, you know. And so I wanted to make sure I could include some of those details. The rest was just all up to imagination, you know. And inspiration from like the PGU and from, you know, other things that whatever would look nice kind of thing. So awesome. And later on, like in some of the photos will be easier to see, but you can see, because another thing I really wanted to focus on was on the angles, the line angles of where everything is directed towards, to kind of but I'll explain that a little bit more later too.
So I want to once again go back to what you said earlier, that it wasn't just really I need to build the collar and that's it, right? There was a lot more planning into it, right? Because it really amazes me, and I'm sure that other people who look at your work, how everything kind of just flows together, at least in my opinion. And I've mentioned it, I think, a long time ago during my shows, that sometimes there's a lot of detail. There's too much detail, to the point where one of the things that you mentioned is, where do I lead the eyes of my of the person looking at my project or at my kit? And I think you explained it like just really well. The fact that you didn't want the focus to be on the chest, on the shoulders, or anything else. I think when you first began your journey of, you know, building this, was I want the focus to be on the head. Everything else is just going to complement the head. It's just there, as opposed to like the main masterpiece is the head, which is funnily enough, it seems like the most. Oh wow, that's gonna sound like an insult, but the most thought went into building the bottom part compared to the head, which seems to have maybe been a little bit simpler than than what you would have imagined compared to everything else that you had to go through.
Yes, you mentioned a really good point. Because Jess, another thing I really like to include in builds, not that I do it all the time and I manage to achieve it every time, but
Right.
what I personally like to see in models, like when I evaluate a model, is I like that wow factor. Like I like it when you look at the model, and when I think we talked about it in the past too. Initially grabs your attention, but
Hmm.
then as you examine it more, and as you look down, normally we're used to looking top down, right?
Right.
Like when you
Right.
look at someone, you talk to them in the face. Like you don't talk to them starting looking down at their feet, right? And so this is kind of one of those things where same thing, right? Like the human eye, right, would be drawn to the whiter part of the head, right?
Right.
In the beginning, but then as you scan down, then you start noticing, oh dang, like look at the internals over
Mm-hmm.
here, like oh man, like, and that's where that wow moment comes, you know, is
Right.
where I hope to create a wow moment where as your eyes scan down, then it's like, oh cool, oh wow, this is a cool detail, you know. And then
Yeah.
so it's kind of the unexpected, right,
Hmm.
that I really enjoy about this hobby, that you can, you
Right.
know, I don't know how successful it is in drawing people's attention, but that's my intention, right, with a
Yeah.
lot of my builds. Is I try to have something where when people look closer, then they're like, oh, this is wow, this is a cool
Yeah.
detail, and then
Yeah.
kind of go from there. So yeah.
Well, speaking of details, one of the more noticeable details, because I'll be honest with you, when I first look at your piece, aside from the head, the main thing that I look at is the circular part that has like the piston that you were talking
Yes.
about that looks like it would connect to the
Yes.
arms. That's where my eyes immediately go
Yes.
afterwards because I really like that piece.
Right.
And we'll talk a little bit
Yeah.
about it because it'll be in the next
Yeah.
slides. But one of the other pieces is, and I didn't know until you showed the work in progress, is where this piece came from. I knew that I had seen it before because I own this. This is from the system base
Yeah.
001, right?
Yes.
And
Yes,
I
that's
have
right.
it. I have it somewhere. But
Nice. Nice.
I'm like, this seems eerily, like familiar to me. Where the hell is this piece from? And so
Yeah.
that goes on to the next one. And not to make this one super long or this part long, just the fact that you're able to see, like, how did you know that you wanted that piece, right? Like, it's not like because you're looking at the whole base.
Yeah.
And this is
yeah.
such a tiny piece from the whole base. You're like, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
take this. How? What were you looking for?
So I think a big part of it is I feel like a lot of times I just have to stare at something long enough to, like, if I look at something long enough, then I'll be like, yes, I can use it. No, I can't use it.
Mhm.
Or yes, there's potential. No, there's no potential. Right. So I remember honestly, like this came. I remember I knew I wanted a frame, and I was honestly going to just scratch build it. But once again, it was a little bit beyond my capability at the time. So I was just looking. I forgot what I was doing. I was literally just looking through the system base, and I'm like, what? This has a really cool kind of frame look that I kind of want to mimic, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, if I cut it over here, I could just cut it out and use it. And so
Yeah.
I tried it, and then it worked wonderfully, and I was like, wow, this actually. So I feel like it's a combination of just staring long enough at pieces and kind of knowing what I want and what I'm
Yeah.
looking for, and
Yeah.
then trying to see if there's potential I can use out of whatever I have, kind of thing, right? So
Right.
this one, honestly, I feel like this moment was very similar to my, I don't know if you remember, but my Kshatriya, I don't know if you remember my Kshatriya Besharang, I used like the lupus chest frame for the calf armor. I don't know if you remember this, but
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
I feel like it was a very similar type of experience where I was just staring at the lupus rex chest internal frame,
Yeah.
and I was like,
Yeah.
this would look like a great calf armor piece.
Yes,
for a
I remember
mechanical
that.
leg.
I'm almost sure that's part of
And
the
so-
first interview that we ever had.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was our first interview,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it was a very similar type of moment where it was
Yeah.
one of that aha moment, and I just went with it, you know.
Eureka
And
moment
so-
there. Yeah.
Yeah, eureka moment, exactly, right. And so I can't claim to be a genius in identifying things, but I think it just came, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I was going to ask, where, like, do you just look at all the things that you have built and then I look behind you? I
Yeah,
can see that you probably have like a graveyard of things. You're like, well,
Yes.
kind of look to the
Yeah.
left and you're like, this is something I could use. No, that is awesome. Yeah, I'm sure that a lot of us would love to have those moments where it's just like this
Yeah.
piece just clicks and it's just the one I need. And that's how the
Right.
universe just works sometimes. But speaking of the pieces that you need, The next one, pieces are from the MG Full Armor Thunderbolt Gundam and HG Thunderbolt Big Gun. This is the piece that I look at them after I look at the, you know, when I look at the head, I go down and I see that and I just think to myself, you know what it is? The Barbatos, the MG Barbatos. And the fact that it has one of the most beautiful frames that I have ever seen. It has a lot of that mechanical kind of like fantasy vibe to it. And I say fantasy because it's not really like engineering into it. It's all fantasy, right? But in my mind, I think I've shared with you, I'm almost sure I shared with you once a video of like a remix that has like old timey anime.
Oh yes, exactly.
Remember that?
Yeah,
remember that
from like the 80s or 90s anime. Exactly, and it's all just mechanical stuff moving.
Yes,
right? And it's
yes, yes. I'm so glad you remember.
I love that. I love
that's why my eyes are immediately drawn to that afterwards because I'm looking for that. There's something about it in my head that I absolutely just love, and you're able to do that with this piece. And there's one little thing I want to mention. Like we'll get into it. I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I love the second part that you say here. Ugly glue line covered up and extra detail added for seamless transition. So you just decided to add that little ring to hide this ugly glue mark. Because when I saw it, I'm like, how did he do that? And then I'm guessing that the original reason was to hide that, and it just kind of flowed with the rest, right? Kind of looked like a piston. But anyway. One, I want to know how many freaking Thunderbolt pieces you have laying around. It's not a cheap kit, along with the, you know. So when you said because I think you mentioned that you wanted originally to be in the back, right before you started playing around with it. You ended up making 2 of these. Were there going to be 2 in the back or just 1 in the back?
It was just going to be 1 on the back.
Okay.
And okay, so this is interesting because sometimes when I look at a kit. it may seem kind of, you know, bad, but I look at the kit, some kits for their parts, you know, for this. I know it sounds so bad because like I buy the kit because I'm like, I love this part so much, you know. And when I first saw the Thunderbolt Big Gun kit, completely honest, all I saw were those gun barrels, and I was like, these things look so cool. One of these days I'm gonna incorporate it into my build, right? And so when I was honestly, that's the only part I built other than the gun barrel part too. Like I ended up using the gun barrel for the main skeleton of this build here. Those 2 pieces were probably the reason why I bought the entire HG Thunderbolt Big Gun kit, because I've never really seen those pieces before, or at least with that specific size and ratio and everything. And so going into this project, I knew immediately I wanted to incorporate that piece, like the cylindrical piece, and also the gun barrel part, you know, the main body of the gun. And so that made it naturally a little bit. So like I said, you know, that was the very first piece I needed to figure out where I wanted to position before I made anything else on the kit, right? So it's actually really cool that you love it so much too, because it is definitely one of my favorite pieces in the entire piece, right?
No, it ended up working great and it looks great. But okay, enough of mechanical, because I could. So to be honest with you guys, the viewers, thank you guys for joining in. By the way, if you're just joining in, I am here with Ryan Lau. Hope you're enjoying this, guys. I do want to encourage you guys to use the chat. Send me a question. You maybe something you'd like to ask on that particular slide to Ryan. I can ask him through here. By the way, I think your wife wrote, said, great job, Mila. I don't want to mess up the name. Brielle and Stephanie say hi. So there's that.
Hi, guys.
And so I just want to encourage you guys to do that. But you know, it's funny. We go for mechanical, which I absolutely love and I gush about. But now I'm going to gush about the panel lining here. Okay. Because it's, you know, it's, I love the fact that you spoke about this in the masterclass that you did with us. How sometimes you don't even really have to go and do your own panel lines. You can just work with what's already given to you. Making a little bit deeper in this case, like what you've done here. And kind of work with that. Why didn't you feel the need to add more detail? Like I understand that maybe the answer might be simple and you might say, well, because I didn't want to overload it with detail, right? But I feel like there was the head here, like the design of the head and the panel lines, was it good enough for you to not have to mess with any more other than maybe add a little bit of the rivets and such?
Yes. Very good point, Jess. Exactly. Like it's one of those things where sometimes in pre-molded panel line details, there's certain panel lines that just don't make sense or that don't look nice. Well, from my point of view, right?
Right.
But when I looked at this one, I was like, you know what? All these panel lines make sense and they look really good, right? I think one part of it is panel lines. There's many different ways, right? Like some people can do very artistic panel lines, right? Some can make super realistic ones, right? And I think this one just looked great as is. And obviously, I was going for more realistic look, right?
Right.
But another big reason why I didn't want to add too many extra panel line details here is because for the details that I do add, I want to make those pop and more noticeable. So what I'm referring to there is, for example, you know, in that like mohawk area, there's this like little rectangle detail right there.
Yeah.
I wanted that to pop, you know, that little mechanical exposure spot there, right?
Right.
And another thing too is oftentimes when we think of detailing a Gundam, panel lining is just one aspect of many other ways of detailing. Like obviously there's paint, right? You can do dual tone grays or whatever, right? Which I ended up doing very subtly. But another big one is obviously water slide decals as well too. So oftentimes I would detail based on where I know I want my water slides to be,
right,
you know? And so because of that, I knew I didn't want to put certain panel lines in certain areas that I knew where I would want a decal to be placed, right? And when I picture it as a whole, it's detailed enough as it is already, right? And I didn't need to add any more that was already there. So, yeah. In the next, I was just saying in the next photo, like you'll notice the one thing I did want to swap out for is like those Vulcans, you know, the forehead Vulcans. Like I thought the original one looked a little bit plain and so I wanted to make that. So it's those little details where when you swap it out that it's like, hey, you know, there's an improvement. That's nice, right? I don't want to, you know, over clutter it with other detail to obscure that. So I'm glad
that you mentioned that again because the water decal part, because that is one of the main things that you touched on our masterclass. I remember that. And I remember when I finished my white dingo, which was after, like long after, the only kit that I've ever truly finished and felt proud of. I remember
you did a great job.
I asked you, I called you that night that I was painting. I was frantic, and you're like, you gotta remember you're gonna put on water decals. So, you know, remember where you're gonna put on those details. You don't want to go overboard. Because I was asking you about, do I add more plot plate? Do I add it here? Do I change the color here? And it's something that I think I had also forgotten about when I was looking at this kit. Is you definitely did kind of expand on your balance of details with the water decals, which we'll see later in the finished product. Obviously, this is more of the concept of you putting it together and making sure that things work. One of the things that I did want to mention is I just love how you added the 2 pistons in the back of the head.
Yeah.
Like it's just and it's tilted forward, so it's very artistic. It's very artistic, I think. Yeah. So,
thanks, man.
like I said, this you added some other little details here now that I actually look at this. Something that caught my eye now. The one on the cheek, you added these little
Yes. Yeah, these little notches right by the cheek area there. Yeah.
Right.
Cuz I wanted to break I thought that cheek area was a little bit too bland when I'm comparing the balance of the neck. So that was another thing too. I wanted to balance the amount of details on the head as to the neck collar.
Right.
You know, and I did the neck collar first. And so I knew I needed to add a little bit more detail just by that cheek area because there were so many, like I didn't want the head to be lack of detail and then the collar all of a sudden a lot more detail. I wanted it to blend in better, right? And so I thought that front cheek cover guard was a little bit lacking, so I just wanted to add that extra bit of detail there just to make it pop a bit. So
well, I think you did a good job there.
Thanks, Jess.
And then over here we have a side view. Again, a better view of those pistons that you put in the back.
Yeah.
Did you completely throw away this base that the original one had?
Yes. Yeah. I didn't use it at all. So the neck is actually joined with the mega size unicorn Gundam neck joint. So
Okay.
I know, like everyone's like, you used the mega size unicorn neck joint. I used his pieces for other projects in the past, but it's basically like the neck area and the ball
Okay.
joint,
Yeah.
and then I transplanted like just the the poly cap to be inside the head. That's because that's what gave the head tilt down. Like the
Ooh.
head can tilt forward and backwards, right?
Oh, so it's
And
got a little bit of movement.
yeah,
Okay.
articulation, yeah. And then after doing that, right, I knew I had my ideal perfect head position, right? Then I was looking at it again. I'm like, you know what? The back looks so bare. Like I feel like it doesn't match. Once again, I'm always trying to think about a balance, striking a balance, right? And I
Right.
was like, I need to add something there. And I'm like, well, why don't I just make exposed like for us humans, right? We have muscles, right? And that's what helps move our neck, right? In robots, they need pistons to help move the head, right? So
Right.
yeah, so I was like, this would be such a cool detail if I could add it there. And then so that's why I wanted to highlight that. Once again, I tried to make it subtle, right? When you're first looking at it, you might not notice it, but then as you examine it more, then you're like, hey, are those neck pistons? And I put
Right.
two in the front as well too. There's two in the front and then two in the back, like two bigger ones in the back and two
Oh,
small.
okay. Yeah.
There's actually four pistons that I put in there.
I see him now. I went on to the next one, which I think
Yeah.
is, man, I've said it before, I'll say it again, one of the sexiest, and that's a weird probably word to use, one of the sexiest things all of you could do for your kit right now that you're working on is completely freaking cover it with primer and then put it together and take that primer freaking picture. It is there's this thing to it, and I know that I'm not the only one who thinks. I know that Joshua Dara also thinks. I know Chris thinks it. Like it's just like there's this over. It just flows. It's like, oh, this is a beautiful thing.
This is my this is my second time doing it, but I did it with my Zeku Zoe build before. And it, I love Joshua Dara's like, his only primer photos, and so I love it now. It's so good. Yeah, I just love to see it in that state. Yeah.
Yep. So Lawrence Retiro says, did you modify the face to make it more intimidating?
Great question there. Actually, no. The faceplate is the original position and size. I actually didn't do anything to the faceplate itself other than just refining details and sharpening, deepening panel lines. But what makes it more menacing looking is the downward head tilt, because all of a sudden it makes the eyes kind of narrower, and it brings the head down, kind of like any mad look. Like when you're mad, right? Your eyes are smaller and your eyebrows are down, right? So it gave that exact same kind of tough look, right? And so that's actually, this is a great photo to explain the general symmetry of lines of what I was trying to achieve. If you look at the side view of this picture, the tilt of the head is in exactly parallel line to the tilt of the neck collar area, but more so the frame.
Oh my God,
you see that frame? And also the piston, the circular piston, they are all three lined down exactly. And so and not only that, but there's a reverse S curve here that you can see. So the head is like the top of a reverse S. And then as you go down, can you see that the base, that the cylindrical base that it's standing on is actually set back a little bit? It's like in the middle, right? But you can see kind of like that S curve there. You know what I'm saying? And so that's similar to like a Gundam's power pose, like when it's standing, like Chris Pabs is perfect at those poses, with the Gundam poses, just standing there with the chest out, right? The head tilted down and back a little bit, and then the legs bent back a little bit, kind of thing, with the spread out with the power pose. So it's the exact same theory of kind of your ratios and posing here. So so that's what gives it the more menacing look.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely see it here. Wow. There's a certain kind of builders that I talk about that, a lot of people in the community know certain builders for certain things, and they tend to overlook others, right? Like there's certain attributes of what makes them a good modeler. I think one of the people that suffers from that a little bit is James, the taco builder, because I feel like a lot of people go to him and they see his LEDs, right? And because he works with that, that's like his thing, right? He works with LEDs. He wires any kit into it.
Yes, he's amazing with that.
But then that overshadows everything else he does in some way, not in a mean way. Like it overshadows everything else he does because all of a sudden people forget how good of a painter he is, how good of a, and all of a sudden he comes out with the kit bash, and then you're like, wait, this guy is wow. And then you look at his pictures, and then you look at his video taking skills and everything, and you're like, wait a second, this is all in one person, and I've just been focused on the LEDs. And the reason I mention that is because then I look at your photos. You take these photos, right? Yeah. So there's this aspect that people don't really talk about when it comes to you, Ryan, and it's that part of being able to really capture a good Gundam photo, like a good photo. And you always, I don't know if this is in your, I'm pretty sure this is in your house, maybe, with the nice kind of like, I've actually, to be honest, I kind of copied it a little bit. I'm pretty sure there's some pictures of mine on my Instagram where I have, because I kind of have like the same tone of wall.
Yes, nice.
So I see this clean look on your photos, and just, I don't think I asked last time, what camera are you using to take your photos?
Good question. So, photography is also one of my hobbies. I love doing photography, and previous to Gunpla, I loved doing street photography. And so with street photography, normally you don't use a DSLR for that because it's too big and clunky and it's too imposing, because the whole thing with street photography is you want to be as stealthy as possible so people don't know that you're there, right? And so so I've been using all these years, I think the last 12 years actually almost, I've been using a Leica. So I use a range, it's like a digital rangefinder camera. And so for this model here, it was my Leica M9 that I used, and I use basically just a prime lens, 50 millimeter f1.4 prime lens. And now I have the Leica M10 camera, the body, right? But I still use the same 50 millimeter 1.4 lens. So and that's the camera that I've always used. It's a manual focus camera. There's no autofocus on it, and so that helps me to really zone in on the specifics of what I want to highlight.
This is the Leica M10. This is what you use to take your gun photos. What?
Yeah. I also, I mean, that's my only camera. I use that camera for everything else too. My wife has a blog as well too that I take all her photos with too. So I honestly, I use it more for my lifestyle shots and stuff like that. But of course I use it for Gunpla as well too. So.
For sure. No, for sure. It's gotta do everything. Lauren says, thanks, really makes a huge difference to the head itself without any modification. He's talking about the changing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's crazy because if you look at the old style RX-78 models, they look extra derpy because the faceplate, you're right, is like down, and there's just such a big space with where the eyes are located, right? But even with an older style face, if you do that head tilt, it makes it suddenly changes the proportions without even actually changing the proportions, right? So it does wonders with that head tilt. Yeah.
Just give me 1 second here because something happened with the music. All of a sudden, it just started playing Guns N' Roses, and it's like, I don't want to get a DMCA. Whoa, it's kind of weird. Anyway, awesome. No, well, the next few pictures, just really quick. Man, see, do you remember before we started the show how I said that I wanted to just kind of focus on certain kits for later on? It's been 50 minutes. We're on the RX-78-3 Exceed bust.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine with me. I'm just saying, like, I can just keep asking questions, but in the vein of like moving on to the next one, I just kind of really wanted to show the close-up pictures of the finished product. I really wanted to talk about the color scheme because I really love the light blue, the muted blue. Really reminiscent for me of Chris Pav's style of of kind of like a pastel kind of colors. I really want to ask the ratio for this because it's so nice.
Ooh. I forgot specifically, but I could tell you there's a lot of desaturation with White Surfacer 1500.
Okay.
I think it was with this model that I would desaturate like tons with my White Surfacer. So Mr. Color, or yeah, Mr. Color, yeah,
That
yeah,
is,
exactly.
I've done the exact same thing, and somebody told me not to. What was it with? I added a white primer, the Mr.
Yes.
Surfacer 1500 white
Yeah.
primer,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
some red to make it less red and a little bit more milky. And I know you
Like
should be using white paint.
Salmon.
Yeah, but I was like, no,
Yeah.
I think the primer should be good. I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
bad thing to do, but thank you for.
You know what's funny? There's so many people who I don't think they've told me specifically this, right? But
Yeah.
I've read in the past so many people be like, never desaturate tones with White Surfacer, right?
Yeah.
But honestly, that's all I use, and it's
Yeah.
worked really well because it's such
Yeah.
a massive bottle too, and it's so smooth. It's probably, to tell you the truth, the later on I'll talk to you about it, but to tell you the truth, like the Ausla build that I build, the SDHG, we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah.
The white parts of that was all only White Surfacer.
What was it? I think it was because I don't have a lot of kits that I've only painted, I think, 2 completely.
Yeah.
The Sasabi
Yeah.
had my original Sasabi RG has that.
Yeah.
I only use the white
Yeah.
primer for certain parts.
Yeah.
For like the white parts
And
underneath.
honestly, like one of the main reasons why is because I just thought that gave me the best kind of AOZ white that I could find.
Yeah.
And it worked great. Like, you know, that's what I use exclusively to desaturate my tones. You
Yeah.
know, so whether it be
That's
grays
awesome.
or blues or anything. So yeah.
I feel
I mean, it's
validated.
worked. Yeah. just watch all the paint chip off over the years.
Yeah,
Nah, I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
just like,
So far it's been
God.
holding strong.
Yeah. Well, Matt, the thing is, like, maybe we should really move on to the next one, but like I really wanted to ask about this bronze and the or copper, I don't know what you'd call it, bronze copper that you use for the
Yes. Pale gold. Yeah.
yeah, that is again muted, very
Yes.
you know, it goes with everything else that's on there because all of these colors are muted or desaturated, as you would call them here. And I don't know how you get did you matte coat that gold?
I did, exactly.
Yeah.
So previously, when I first started painting metallics, I would always just either leave it without any coat, or I would gloss coat it and leave it as gloss coat. But for this one I actually did gloss coat first and then put the decal on, and then I matte coated it. So it's like doubly protected, right? But
wow,
I don't know. I just really like the matte look. Like you can still see, like you can even see the sheen of the light when it hits it.
Yeah.
You know, it's satin, right? It's more satin than it is matte because naturally the metallic has metallic flakes in there. So I didn't want it to once again stand out too much, but I did want it to stand out enough so that it's noticed. So so that's why I used the exact same matte coat I used for everything else here, but it turns satin because it's metallic. And I just love that kind of subtle metallic look to it, but not just screaming at you like I'm metal. And because if you think about it, everything else should be metal too, right? Like, and why would just the pistons be more metallic than everything else, right? So
exactly, that's
why I kind of wanted to just make that hint there. So yeah.
And did you use panel liner here for this, or is this gray marker? This is gray panel liner?
I used panel liner. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think for the I think for everything except for the head, I used almost black panel liner. I never like to use just strictly black. I actually took my Tamiya black panel liner fluid, and I added like a bunch of, you know, lighter gray to it, you know, and some even whites enamel. Like later on we got enamels here, so I to just kind of make it more into a charcoal gray panel liner, and that's what I used for all the darker parts. And then for the head part, it was a mixture of a slightly lighter version of that, so more of a gray color for that. So
nice. Well, that's the RX-78-3 Exceed Gundam bust. I would love to talk a little bit more about it, but we're gonna move on to the next one. But no, seriously, awesome job there. I wouldn't even get to the water decal part. I wanted to ask about the water decal. Okay, moving on. The next one is the Deep Striker. So this is the artifact. The tiny super. It's funny how how it can fool you into thinking that it's a bigger kit than it is when you, especially when you're taking a look at this picture, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
amount,
exactly.
it's even worse, because you know, you sent a video and I'm looking at your thumb moving all these parts, right? I'm thinking, okay, so then this thing is like this tight. But I'm getting ahead. The Deep Striker, this was also for a contest, right?
Yes, it's also one of Zach's contests.
Yeah.
As you can tell by now, I just love joining Zach's contests.
Yeah. Yeah. So
this was also really fun because this is a lull in the year, I think, where they didn't have GBWC. And so it gave me the opportunity to do all these fun passion projects that I've always wanted to participate. So yeah, this was another one of Zach's competitions. It was their artifact contest.
Right.
And the whole point of this contest is that you can only use artifact parts, Gundam Artifact Series parts, or up to 20% of pla plate for your model. And yeah, and that's it. And so you can't use any other parts or any other kits or anything like that. And so I thought this was a really, really big challenge from the get-go. And I was like, you know what? Like, let's just give it a try. You know, there's nothing that can go wrong, right?
Yeah.
And so I just went off with it, and I absolutely, to this day, this is probably one of my favorite builds. To this
wow,
day.
really?
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna jump right in because looking at these pictures, it's something. Like let's take a look at right here, just before and after. Take a look at his thumbnail and the fact that it looks like he zoomed in with a microscope. How difficult was it to work with this scale?
Very. It was funny. Some of my, I think I forgot what one comment or someone commented where it's like, your fingernail print is wider than the chisel line that you're adding, right? It's like you're chiseling fingerprints that are like, you know, on your Gunpla, right? But anyways, it was really challenging because a couple things is I knew I couldn't go overboard with the detailing, like additional detailing. So if you notice, I didn't really add extra panel lines, at least not that many, right? But I wanted to refine the existing details because these artifact kits actually come with naturally a lot of details already. And so I just knew I wanted to refine. So for this model, so my previous bust model, it was about scratch building, right? And combining scratch building with kit bashing, right? Whereas this project, what I really learned from this one is how big of a difference refining existing details can give you, right? And so over here, it was pretty difficult because it was during this build, I think, that I ended up buying. Have you seen those like ring LED lights with a magnifying glass?
Right. Yeah.
So it was right before this build that I bought one of those, and it came perfect. Like I didn't even plan for it. I was like, oh, I think this could be useful, right? And it did turn to be super useful because like I would just zoom in. To tell you the truth, that is probably really bad for your eyes, but I would just like I would literally just put it right up to my eye. I wear contacts, so I wear glasses. So it's like as if, Jess, you were to take your glasses off, and if you like put it super close to your eye, it's like you have superhuman vision almost. Like you just see so like every single detail. And so you just have to be careful just to move. Like the tiniest little extra movement could mean like you scratch up like a whole area, right? So you just have to go super slow, super carefully. And so I mean, it took a long time, and honestly, my fingers are really strained and my eyes are really strained, so I had to really be careful with that. But other than that, right? It was. I mean, this is also the most scratch building I've ever done. Later on, you'll see, but this really helped force me to become creative. Like I feel like I've never been as creative as I have with this build here. So that's why it's to date is probably my favorite build. Yeah.
Well, this build is definitely a testament to that same old Ryan that I spoke of earlier, of learning, of keeping the tradition of just wanting to learn and not being scared of moving to a different kind of medium, because this isn't really a different medium, it's more of a different scale that really adds a level of difficulty that I think would kind of turn anybody off from it. Like, holy shit, like I'm looking at this picture and I, you know, like even just that comment that you mentioned, right? Real quick, Edsel Reyes, it sends a little heart, and then Frosted Snow says, hi Ryan, you're the best.
Hey Sharon. Oh, so nice. Oh, thanks for tuning in.
So Yeah. Anyway, one of the things on the right side I see is you added plot plate.
Yes, yes. So so this is some of the details I added, and one of the main reasons why
Yeah.
is I made the plot plate so that there's actually a seam. If you look at the left photo, there's actually a seam right there because that's where the arm fits into. And
Right.
so I didn't want to close that seam because for ease of painting. Because if I could have easily just like fused the two pieces together, but
Hmm.
I would have had to do tons of like masking in order to paint all those separate shoulder details because
Right.
they come in. I think all the colors of the suit was actually basically on that one shoulder there. And so what I ended up doing is rather than actually closing the seam, I chiseled the seam down and then I glued a piece of plot plate just on one half of it. So that when you sandwich the two pieces together, the plot plate covers the seam. And it looks like it's
Oh.
just one smooth piece. So I chiseled the entire area back and then I glued the plot plate just on one side. So I can still
Okay.
snap it open and then
Yeah.
still close it, but then it closed up the seam. So
Nice.
that was kind of
Okay.
how I went around that.
There you
So
go again
yeah.
with the having to get
Yes.
imaginative and creative with how you solve
Nice.
things. Okay, next one here. Now, I know you said you didn't add a lot of detail and this and that.
Yes. Yes.
Now, if my eyes
What's going on here,
deceive,
right?
like on this left picture, I can see a little bit of panel line, like the faintest panel lines
Yes.
on the original piece. And then I look at
yeah.
the after picture, and then I listen, and then I think of the Ryan who told me 5 minutes ago he didn't add any more detail. Did you add
Yeah.
detail here?
No, I didn't. Isn't that interesting? So that's exactly what's molded in the original piece. But except
Wow.
if you ever build the excess artifact kit, one side of the binder actually has better printed detail than the other. Like it's almost like
Oh.
drowned out on the other side, but it's ever so slightly so faint, but you can still see it. And so, but this here, I couldn't just simply run my chisel over top of that existing line because there was almost a non-existent line. I could just see like a little divot in the plastic. So I actually still had to use like scribing tape, right? To like tape off all these areas to refine and go once again, super slowly and gently, like super light strokes until I deepen it enough, especially around like those rounded edges and everything.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't add additional panel lines to the existing detail here, which is surprising to a lot of people actually, because yeah, they would all ask about this piece actually. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, this it still kind of boggles my mind because as again going to chiseling and panel lining and scribing or whatever, like what size chisel were you using?
I was using the 0.1 millimeters Madworks. So it's like basically their tiniest one, short from like the pin needle one that you use to score.
Yeah.
But because I still wanted like that rectangular divot of the panel line as opposed to just the needle scoring the area there.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I used the 0.1 on this, on all the panel lines here actually.
Wow.
Yeah. And then some of the notches I used like a 1.5 to 0.2 millimeter, or like, sorry, 0.15 and 0.2 millimeter.
Yeah.
To make the notches. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I can only imagine how tough that must have been. Like you said, you were very careful. But a place where I don't see that I kind of always wanted to work with a lot is the plot plating. Like it's a little difficult to kind of well in my mind to kind of wrap my head around wanting to create something out of these plates, right? And but you did this here. You talk about stacking the plot plates and for the barrel of the gun, right? So
yes, that's right.
Tell us a little bit about that here.
So what I did here is basically once again I had tons of images of how the actual Mega launcher looked like, right? And so I counted the same amount of kind of these, I don't know what you call them, basically they kind of look like heat sinks, I guess, right? And I knew exactly kind of like how many barrels there were too. And so in order to create symmetrical pieces, right? And this is kind of a technique I learned from watching others too. Basically, you just very, very subtly just do a tiny dab of CA glue, any type of CA glue on plot plate, and you stack up a bunch. In this case here, I stacked 6 together, right? And then I drilled those 3 holes into it, and then I fit, well, mainly the 2, and then I fit the rod in there, and then I kind of drew out the design of what I wanted, and then I polished, drilled out kind of those notches in there to make it look like step number 3. And then if you use any type of like super thin separator, you can use a scalpel blade or whatever, then you can snap apart those pot plate pieces, because the pot plate actually doesn't, if you put it enough, of course they're going to adhere, but it doesn't fuse, right? Because the CA glue actually just acts as like a, you know, it's different than melting the plastic together, right? It just adds as like a little adhesive layer that's easy to break apart. And then once you break apart, then you have 6 perfectly recreated symmetrical pieces that fit all around the barrels there. And so that, you know, of course it took a long time. I mean, I make it, once again, I feel guilty sometimes because making these steps make it seem like, oh, it's just step 1, step 2, step 3, 4, and bam, you got it. But honestly, it probably took like an hour and a half just to do that.
Right.
So
it's like between one,
of course. Yeah.
I was gonna say between step 1 and step 2, there's like a 1.1, 1.2.
Yeah. Exactly. Right? And a lot of checking and a lot of, you know, or even before I even do that, I have to think about how I'm going to do it too. So, but I really want to show, that's the whole purpose of these work in progresses, is not to show people, oh, hey, look how amazing I did this. But it's more so like, hey, this is how I made it. Like, you can follow similar processes and do the same thing too.
For sure. Yeah.
Because I never got to see how a lot of this stuff was done in a stepwise process when I first started learning. So a lot of it here is honestly just experimenting and then and sharing it. So yeah.
Well, on the next slide, we have, okay, so this is when things start getting a little crazy. Yeah, so there's one of the, I don't know if a lot of people know this, I'm sure some must know this, but the whole kit can be disassembled and assembled with magnets.
Yes, magnets and pins. Yep.
Yeah, so at that scale, so one thing is to work it on a master grade or on a high grade, right? Another thing is to work it on a microscopic, you know, microbe of a kit. Yeah. So, looking at how you went about this, like, just how was this more difficult than what you had done before, or when you got to this point where you like, man, should I have done this, or you know,
did I ever regret my decision?
Yeah. Yeah, because like, it just seems like such a difficult process, or more like painstaking, if anything. You know, so
it's really funny. I thought I would think of that as well too. Like, I thought I would have reached a point where I would have been, you know, thinking to my head, this shoulder binder took me 5 hours to define, right? I'm going to give up. You'd think that I would think that, but it was the opposite. It's like, after I did the shoulder binder, I'm like, hey, I can do this. Like, if I can refine the shoulder binder, I think I can refine the head. I left the head to the last, mind you, because that was the smallest detail, the tiniest detail.
Right.
And so same rule applies with this whole scratch building thing. When I started building this barrel, at first I was like, okay, you know what? If I can get the barrel done, hey, I think I can get the rest of the gun done too, you know? And so it was one of those things where once I achieved one thing, it pushed me and encouraged me to move on to the next one. And it was one of those things where I would constantly face these walls and being the first one. The biggest challenge here, to tell you the truth, was not so much in figuring out the attachment. It was a little bit tricky, but was more so balancing the entire thing, because this gun is so massive, right? And I didn't want it to cause the model to like kink to the side, or for it to start drifting other armor pieces off, because everything's so tiny, you have to remember, right? Like, so I had to think of a lot of different ways of securing this so that it would be nice and solid, right? That regardless of how much weight you're adding to one side, it's not going to topple over. So I feel like it was more harder to do, like, figure out the balancing act kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I always like to over engineer a little bit and make it stronger than it needs to be. But I think a big part of scratch building, at least for me, is just figuring out different parts that you need, focusing on one part at a time. In this case, it was like the barrel was the first part. The middle part, this left collage here, the attachment to the suit, the rectangular block, like the cinder block looking thing, the attachment was the middle part. the second part, and then the third part was just the back part of the mega launcher, you know, and
Yeah.
and so I separated into those three kind of parts, and then honestly, it's just a matter of gluing those three parts together, and then that
Wow.
made
Okay.
the final mega launcher, right? So
Yeah.
so that made it more achievable, as opposed to if I was starting off with like, I'm going to build the entire thing in one go, right? That would be a
Yeah.
lot more overwhelming. And then after building it, I'll be like, oh well, how do I attach this to the suit? Oh, it's too heavy for the suit,
Yeah.
you know. So it's
So
almost like thinking one step at a time,
right. Being able to tackle
and
problems.
building
Yeah.
it from there. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, yeah, that is just, yeah. I mean, then when I go on to the next slide, and this is finally it coming together, right? You
Yeah.
got the back part, you got the barrel,
Yes.
you got the block,
Yes.
you got the
Yeah.
whole thing. You know, quick question.
Yeah.
Ratio wise, was this only 20% plow plating?
Yes. Yeah. So it's really interesting, right? Because the gun the gun makes such a big part of it, right? But it is, you know. In fact, it was probably closer to like maybe just like 15%, I would say.
Mm.
But that's also why I wanted to include artifact parts to detail up the gun too. You know, like those
Yeah.
like that wing part in the top. It's very characteristic of the Deep Striker.
Yep. Yep.
And yeah, and then I added those two little fuel tank things, or ammo tanks, I would call them here.
Yeah.
And that's extra detail. I thought that looked really cool. I was literally playing around with that, and I was like, hey, this isn't really part of the original suit, but I was like,
Yeah.
hey, this looks cool. I'm just gonna add it in there, kind of thing.
Yep.
right?
Just
So-
put it. Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome.
just shove it in there, kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
on the next slide, we have the it coming together, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
now we can see. This is without the guns. No, the gun is there. Sorry, I
Yeah.
completely.
It's just facing towards you. Yeah, exactly.
And I guess yeah, it's definitely 15-20% like you mentioned ratio wise.
Yeah.
Um.
Because there's actually a lot of like thickness to that. Like there's like this shows just a very narrow portion, but yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Look at the next. The next one just shows how much more detail you were able to chisel out that was already in there.
Yes. Yeah.
And the fuel tanks, I think, is one of the most. I think you can either do it right or you can do it wrong on design. Like for example, I think the Psycho Zaku does it wrong because those things are like
the massive thing that's off the back,
yeah, it's just weird. But I
like
think
a
this is
water
a-
bottle.
yeah, like I think this is looks a lot better. Honestly, I can see why this has become, like you mentioned, one of your favorite ones. Is mainly I feel like you took a lot from it. Like you actually,
Yes.
like
Yes.
I think you learn from every single build,
Yes.
but
yes.
I think this one was more like I could probably see you feeling like a new builder
yes.
trying to figure
Yes.
things out, right?
Yes.
As before, you're probably like,
Yeah.
oh, I probably ran into this problem before. This is how I fixed it last time. Do it again.
Exactly.
And over here, there was
Exactly.
probably no reference to that before.
That's right. And honestly, like before, I would be taking an actual kit that would, the arms would attach into the torso and the legs would attach onto the waist, right? And then I would modify that, right? But this one here was literally taking separate parts and putting them all together, but not only doing that, but figuring out how I can put it together and having it stay that way, right?
Mhm.
And I'm glad you're just showing this side view here really quickly, because like once again, do you remember how with my my head bust, my RX
Yeah.
G3 head bust, I was telling you about those 3 parallel lines, right?
Yeah.
This one over here was a different one. You know, it's kind of like the V look, you know, when you're looking at it.
It's
And
like an
that's the
arrow.
one really, yeah, exactly, right? And so that was exactly the look I was going for. And I had to, like, honestly, those boosters and stuff, like those were all angled at a specific angle. Like they weren't just like slapped on kind of thing, right? And
Right.
same with the fuel tanks, because the fuel tanks magnify the angle. Like the farther you go out, the more separated there are, right? So I looked a lot at the original line art to see kind of, okay, well, what makes this silhouette look so cool and look so Deep Striker-ish, right? And so
Yeah.
even the gun, the mega launcher gun, is angled up a little bit, as opposed to angling straight horizontal. And so
Right.
I wanted to create those angles to kind of,
Well,
yeah.
in street photography, correct me if I'm wrong. In street photography, a lot of what it is, when you take, obviously anybody can just grab a camera and take a photo, right?
Yeah.
But to make a photo interesting is when you start talking about
Yes.
parallel lines, you start talking about
Yes.
angles to make an
100%.
arrow to kind of draw the line,
Exactly.
things
Yes.
that subconsciously we as as human
Yeah.
beings we look at and we just generally like. There's something to it.
Yes.
That's why there's like pictures of like the street and the street is
Yes.
like in line with like a
Exactly.
building and you're like, wow, that's such a good picture, but you
Exactly.
don't think about that. So that's why
Exactly.
I really meant what I said. Uh, Before where it's like people can look at your modeling all they want, but there is this side of your photography that you're able
Aw,
to
thanks,
kind of
Jess.
cater to satisfy the person that's looking at it, right? And I think that's
Aw,
that's
thanks,
that's a
man.
really good
And
it
I
speaks
have
well on
one,
your skills. What's up?
yeah, I have one quick tip about photography too, in terms of finding good angles. What I do is I take my iPhone and I take it in all different angles. And then I look back and see which angle is the most appealing. And then that's the angle I use my actual camera at when I'm shooting. And I try to capture it, you know?
Right.
And I find that that's the most efficient for me is when I can find all different angles, right? And
Right.
anyways, but that's just a little tiny tip for photography. So,
Hey, any tips that people can take, man, I'll take them all.
uh,
The next one, oh, so here's your video.
nice, nice.
So let's take a look at this video, guys. Because when I saw it, I was like, oh. So let me just press pause here and put the music on here. All right, here we go. I just realized that the music that the video has doesn't play through the channel because I didn't add
Oh,
the little audio part, so I just ended up putting. But
that's
okay, so this video, it just to me, I think I mentioned this to you before the show started, how it painted the scale for me. Right, I'm just gonna replay this video, put it in the background
sure.
while you tell us a little bit about the magnets and how you went about making sure things where they needed to go.
Yes.
Hey, Nupla Builder,
Yeah.
thanks for joining in.
Yeah, so for this one over here, this build here, it was interesting because it's such a tiny build. One of the challenges I didn't think I would experience is matching the poles of the magnets, because if you think about it, literally the distance between these magnets here is like less than a centimeter in some spots.
Yeah.
And so if I had two opposing poles, it would like repel each other, right? And so I had to be very careful with like where I position the magnets and how I position the magnets. And that's
Mhm.
why I had to use pins for some areas. Some areas, actually, the most important ones were the lower boosters, where I used a combination of magnets and pins to help stabilize them so that they're angled at the same angle. Otherwise, if it's magnets, they'd just be like separate, right? But
Right.
I pinned it as well too, in addition to magnets, to help put it together. Because if I just left it as pins, it would honestly like plop, right? So it was a combination of like magnets in one spot and then pin in another spot, and that helped kind of secure it. And the
Right.
reason why I use magnets on some and pins on others rather than just pinning the entire thing is because some areas I think the surfaces just lended better itself. Like otherwise, I would have had to put like 2 or maybe even 3 pins
Yeah.
to prevent it from rotating, right? And so that's why magnets was just an easier way in some areas, right? As long as I had access to it.
Yeah.
So honestly, a lot of it was just looking at 2 pieces and seeing where I could fit. If it's too small to fit a magnet, I would pin it. If it's big enough to fit a magnet, I would try to fit a magnet there.
Right.
And of course, other things to consider for this build too was some parts I ended up gluing in afterwards too. Like for example, the arm, I
Okay.
glued that in afterwards. Like I didn't. It's not secured by magnets or pins, right? And the reason why I had to pin and magnet some parts is because I needed to paint it separately. Otherwise, it would have made it terrible to. Oh, this is another thing. I airbrushed this kit, 100% airbrushed. Like everything was airbrushed. So
How
like
did you?
yeah. So that's why I had to make it so modular, because
Yeah.
I should say maybe, okay, maybe not 100, maybe 99.9%. The only parts I did not airbrush is the tiny green lens detail and the blue lens detail that you see on the radome, the blue lens detail of the radome, and the green on the gun.
Okay.
And I think there's also green on the chest booster armor thing. But it's only the green and the blue that I did not airbrush. Otherwise, everything else was airbrushed. And so like I said before, the shoulder was a very key part, because the shoulder literally had every single color of the suit. It had the white, it had the red. In fact, a lot of people don't notice this too, but I actually did the camo pattern in the red as well too. Like this, it's really known for like the lighter red and the darker red camo pattern. So I actually did the camo pattern on the shoulders as well too. It's easier to see in person, like not in the photos as easily.
Right.
But yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I use so many pins and magnets for this build, as opposed to just gluing everything together, because I wanted to. That's another challenge I set for myself for this build too. Is I was like, I want to make this artifact as clean as possible too, And so it was a big. If anyone's built the artifact series, you'll notice that the surfaces of all the artifact models are actually bumpy. So I had to sand all the surfaces down so that it's nice and flat and smooth, so that it'll reflect in the paintwork as well too. Yeah.
Wow, a lot of work, and then it's awesome because I wish you could do this for all of your kits. By the way, is add the picture outlining what parts from different kits you used or what they are, right? So even just here, we have the XS Gundam rear skirt armor, which you reuse. So you have the Rick Diaz a bunch of times, the Plow Plate, the Virulent, the Nightingale, the High New Gundam. Like
High New,
there's so many things that you used for such a tiny freaking it's so bewildering to me. Just try to wrap my head around these things. I want one of these, but you know what's. This is gonna sound like a snide to like other builders, and don't take it like that, guys. But you have more color separation on this than some people do in their master grades, right? It's absolutely crazy, man. How do you do it? Like, I honestly, seriously,
a big part of it, honestly, when I was doing it, I honestly would ask myself, is it possible for me to do this, right?
Right.
And a lot of the times, I told myself I wouldn't know until I tried, right? And so when I started doing it, and it's interesting because people are like, "How did you mask this off?" I took a picture actually of how I masked off a part, and my answer to that was I would just have to cut smaller masking tape. Like everything is in the same ratio. I remember cutting. I remember cutting masking tape literally like a fraction of a 0.2 of a millimeter, right? And I would cut 50 of those, and then I would cut those in half, right?
Yeah.
To make them shorter, and I would be masking a circular detail with probably 25 or 30 of those, right? And then I would move on to the next detail. So that front, the crotch armor thing or whatever you call it, right?
Yeah.
That took me probably just 3 to 4 hours just to mask that.
No way! Oh my god!
I think it took like five layers of masking, because everything was, once again, everything was airbrushed, right? And so when I told people that, they were like, "You're a madman," and I was like, well, I don't know, that was a challenge I set out for myself, and that's what I did. So
wow,
just cut smaller masking tape.
Yeah. Just it's like whenever my friends and I are playing video games, and we're just trying to be stupid to each other, and how do I, we're just like, hey man, just don't die. Just don't die in the game.
Yeah, exactly. Just aim for the head and don't die.
Just don't die. That's it. Seriously, this is wow. Even just looking at the case and knowing how big this thing is, just kind of speaks to the scale. Man, your cases are always so clean, man. I really need that contact. I for some of my kids, man.
I honestly just look at a lot for whenever I see any cases. We have a model store over here that sells cases. This one specifically I bought from Michael's. This is actually meant for mini footballs.
Oh,
And yeah, and so I was just looking around and I'm like, hey, this one I think can fit my artifact. And so yeah, I bought it and I used it. So Michael's has a lot, right?
yeah.
And there's also a model store that we have in Edmonton here that also sells some cases as well too that I modify. Like my next model that you might be showing is modified from that case there, and my head bust, like the G3 head bust, that one was from EB Games or GameSpot now. You know, they have it for those pop figures.
Right.
I just bought one of those and I just I just modified it a little bit by putting the name tag over top of the color thing. But anyways,
Right.
yeah. So
Okay.
wherever I go, I'm always in search of these things.
It's just
so,
like random cases chilling there. You're like, all right, I want this. Okay. All right. Well, that was the Deep Striker. We're already an hour and a half into our show, and we still have. See, I'm telling you, man, I knew it. I told you way before the show started. I'm like, this is gonna happen. We're gonna go on to the next one because I really want to speak about that one.
Sure.
And the next one is the Patlabor.
Yes.
That you worked on. This has got to be one of my favorite ones that you've ever done. I mean, look,
Aw, thank you.
when I think of yours and I'm like scale 1 to 10, most of them are like 10s, and this one's like just a slightly higher 10. And the thing is, I think it's such a simple, way of really, more than anything, showcasing your kit. I really love the diorama that came with this kit. I really liked the way that it kind of just stands there. It's not menacing. It's just, I feel like I could walk out into like Calgary and see this happening, right? Compared to like, and I was talking to you about this earlier, like instead of seeing some like, white dingo coming down from the sky or a Cassatra, right? Like I could see this happening. I think that's what Patlabor and like we were talking about Macross doing, a more realistic kind of like in real life designs. Now, getting ahead of myself, this is a Patlabor kit that is, if I'm not mistaken, is it made by Banda or by a different company?
Great question. So this one over here, this kit is actually a kit bash, and so it is definitely made to look like Patlabor, but it's actually the base kit of this is actually a 5-star stories kit.
Right, the pointy one.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so I saw I can't claim that this is 100% my original idea, because I saw an art of this actually, a combination of 5-star stories and Patlabor. And so when at the moment I saw it, because I love Patlabor, like you mentioned, I love Patlabor and Macross now. Just the idea of how it could exist in real life,
right?
And so ever since I was a kid, I always loved the design of the Patlabor, and that's also kind of why I liked the White Dingo, because it gave me some Patlabor vibes. You know? And so I always loved the Patlabor. And so when I saw this, I think it was like a fan art of someone that drew it, I was like, this is so cool. I had to find out if there's any kit that looks like it remotely, and I want to make it, right? Because I know that they have Patlabor model kits. The Patlabor model kit that I used, because the 5-house story kits I used was Wave. That was the brand. And I forgot what the brand of it wasn't Bandai though, the Patlabor one. It was a different company. I forgot what it was. Sorry, because it was like a year and a half ago that I built this. But anyway, so I combine aspects of both. But of course, I used the aesthetic and the pose of the 5-star stories, but added Patlabor details to it. So So in this picture over here, this is the the 5-star stories head that I reshaped with flat plates and putty. This is also a little bit early in my flat plate scratch building skill game. I'm still early at it, don't get me wrong, but so I'm using a different type of putty here that I probably wouldn't have used normally. But anyways, so it required a lot of refinement to make it look like that. And then I built separate shoulders that were like the Patlabor shoulders, because they have to have that characteristic police light attached onto it. So you can see in the next photo too, like how modified it and added it onto the original 5-star Stories shoulder frame.
Yes, because the shoulder, the
Yeah.
5-star shoulders, and in general
Yeah.
the shape of those
Pointy.
kits, they're very pointy. Like they would poke
Yes.
your eye out, literally.
Yes.
And then,
Yeah.
and
You
then,
kill someone.
yes. I don't know if I know this is completely off topic, but I don't know if you've already played around with the MGX Strike Freedom, but it has those like clear parts that are very Patlabor-esque. I don't know if I've seen it. Yeah. So when I see that,
I've seen your review actually. I've seen your review.
yeah, it has those nice. It's great. Anyway, I'm getting completely off course, but anyway, you were talking about how, you know, real quick. I feel like I'm just, I'm. It's like people say, you know, in the streets, you know, just gassing you up, but I just love how you're like, man, this is very early in my plot plating journey.
No, I don't want
It's like Michael Jordan saying, you know, it's very early when I started shooting the basketball into the hoop, you know. But it's yeah, just seeing the way that you were able to get that Patlabor look onto that design that has nothing to do with it in some way, you know, like you were able to mold it, and I think that's a very difficult skill to perfect, and I think you did a really good job. So I kind of, since this was in the beginning, like you said, when you were working with like plot plating, did you find it difficult? Because you said you went through a lot of revisions, like with the head.
Yes, 100%. Like this head basically was, I was thinking of ways of doing it. And you can see here, like the original head is like that. I used the forehead part of the MG Victory Gundam and to have that little bulge there. And then I used just plot plates to stack the form, but I honestly did a ton of sanding to reshape it. And I had to do tons of refinement because the putty that I used, I think it was mill put here that I used. It's good, but I prefer epoxy sculpt putty a lot more because I just found the texture of this one to be a little bit more rubbery than what I liked. And so you can imagine like hard plot plate against a rubbery type of putty. Yeah, it was tough. Right, and I would sand it to the point where the plot plate would get so thin, and then the rubbery kind of putty was exposed, and then the plot plate would end up just like breaking off, and I'd end up with this like ugly seam kind of thing, right?
Right.
So then I ended up having to like chisel it out and then patch it back up. So there's a lot of like patch up work here because I didn't realize how much I would have to reshape it, and I used the same. If you look at the cheek shield area, like in step 6, I actually put like very tiny putty just on the side of the cheek shield to thicken it up. And it's really tiny. Like the each square that you see on my mat is like 1 centimeter, right? So that's like each piece is like 0.5 of a millimeter thick kind of thing, right? And so when you're putting such thin putty on there, it was, I don't know, there's a lot to learn from this build. So, but anyways, yeah, it was fine. In the end, it was a learning lesson for me, right?
For sure.
I learned that myself, I couldn't work with that putty as well. So I use a different putty.
Maybe that's what I should do. I think I talked to you about putty a while ago, mainly because the putty came from, but where I saw it and I really wanted to perfect it was from Robbie Pla himself. Because like you see him work with putty, and then he creates like this whole piece out of like nowhere. Like it's funny because you say that you kind of do a disservice to having step 1, 2, and 3. You see him roll up putty, and then like the next scene, it's like a brand new piece, and you're like, okay, like
Robbie Pla's a roller roll, man. That guy's a monster.
Yeah. But anyway, on the next slide, you're still working on the shoulder, getting that to kind of fit in there.
Exactly. And like once again, with Patlabor, there's certain really key characters. So once again, I would look at Patlabor, I'd be like, what makes Patlabor look like Patlabor? Like, what do we like about him? The first thing is in the head, there's like the rabbit ear thing, right? That's really characteristic of Patlabor. The next thing is on the head, there's always those like dots, the 3 dots on each side. Those are like the rivet dots, right, on the head. So that's the same thing that I have to put on. The next very characteristic thing is also the rivet dots on the shoulder armor. I don't know if like, at least to me, you know, when I look at it, I'm like, that's Patlabor-esque, you know? So I knew that in this shoulder armor, obviously it's not the same shoulder armor shape as the original Patlabor, but I knew I had to add that detail on the side, you know? And so that's kind of just what this is showing here.
Wow.
And that shoulder piece is actually from a Patlabor kit, you know.
Oh,
But I had
okay.
to drill those. I had to drill those 7 holes in there, so because it didn't come with the set. I think it was for a Patlabor Unit 2 or something like that. I forgot what it was.
Okay, so it didn't
For
come
some
with
reason,
it.
yeah, it came with 2 different shoulder armors, and I think one, the dots weren't really in the right place, so I took the blank one and I just drilled the holes where I wanted them to be.
Right.
So, yeah. And then the next characteristic thing, of course, is the chest, is the police emblem, right? And so this one was actually pretty interesting because this was probably the hardest challenge for me in this build, is how I can modify the chest to make it look like Patlabor-esque, right? And so for this one, it took a lot of head scratching, you know.
Okay.
And I used, I work in the dental field, so I used actually, you know, legit dental impression materials to make a mold of the star.
Oh, so you were cheating. You were cheating.
Yeah. I was using my expertise. and so that's what I used to make that star emblem, because I took a mold of the original emblem. And because I didn't want to sand up the original emblem, right? And then so I made a cast of that, I guess, out of dental material. So that's funny. That's the same dental material that you use for, like, you know, crowns and fillings and stuff like that. So anyways, it's kind of funny. And and then I just remolded everything there. So
wow. I think that's a first, man. I think that may be a first.
Yeah.
100%.
Exactly.
So now I have to ask, when you put here back of the Lupus Rex head, was this one of those eureka moments where you're just chilling at your desk and you're like,
Yes. Yep. This is another eureka moment. You're right. Actually, good point. Because, like, once again, I had to look for a very specific shape. Like, that's like a mango shape, or I don't even know how to describe that shape.
Yeah,
it's like a biking helmet shape.
Right. I was literally about to say the back of a biking helmet shape,
exactly,
which is weird.
Right? It's the back of a biking helmet shape. And so it's not a shape that you typically see in Gunpla, right? Or in any model, or many models actually, right? And so so one day I was just looking through my parts, right? And I was like, hey, this piece might work, right? But it needs modification, but I think there's potential, right? And so it just turned out to be the back of a HG Lupus Rex set. And that's the same Lupus Rex that I used the chest armor for my Kshatriya.
Kshatriya, okay.
Half,
right, nice,
and
good.
so
they keep giving. Awesome.
They keep giving. Exactly.
So you just inserted the emblem, put and putty to lock in place.
Exactly.
Wow.
And then sanded everything down to refine.
Who would have? I would have never guessed that was like dental material or anything like that. This is so crazy. It's so crazy.
Exactly. It's funny.
So speaking of putty, is the black putty? Is this the milliput? No, right?
Yeah, I think it's the milliput. Yeah, it's the milliput here that I use. And this is once again, I found it to be a little bit more rubbery than I liked.
Yeah.
And I realized that when I was scribing. Like, for example, when I'm scribing on the plastic, you get that nice kind of crispiness, right? But then once I went onto the milliput, it was more of a rubber. It's not like you actually can't squeeze it like rubber, right? But it's just when I'm scribing, I can feel that difference, you know?
Yeah.
And so it didn't feel like I was scribing on a hard plastic surface, which I should have expected, because it's not the exact same material, right? But yeah.
I don't think you can account for it though. I when I was working on my Jester that's never been finished, and I did putty stuff on it, and I try to scribe things onto it, I was like, oh, this is like, in my mind, I'm just like working with plastic. And the moment you put your chisel onto it, you can feel like the difference in like tension, like the force you're putting down into it. Like there's this resistance that's like not plastic, you know?
Exactly. And that's kind of the thing that I didn't like, because I didn't want to have, like, for you to see a chisel line and then to see suddenly an interruption, you know? And then it just looks different. And then you're just like, whoa, how come that looks so different, right? So to me, it kind of, you know, it bothers me a little bit. But
yeah, for sure.
Honestly, in the long run, like after it's painted and everything, like even now, you can't really notice a difference. But the biggest issue for me was that when I was sanding it thinner, it would like chip away. It like didn't really bond as well. And for me, I was like, I don't like that, right? So anyway,
it's not gonna work.
I just, yeah.
Okay. Well, on the next one, oh man, I guess I organized this I should have put the finished product of the Patlabor, but we go into the
Oh,
dio.
that's okay. Yeah,
And
that's fine.
so this is the part, I think, look, aside from the kit itself, like I mentioned, my favorite part of this whole thing is the dio.
Yeah.
And the way it kind of just works together. I had never seen you work with a dio like this before, and you know, to be frank with the viewers, you know, before we started the show, I asked you about it, and you're like, no, this is like the first time I kind of did this kind of thing, right? So, what were you trying to invoke here? Like, you weren't going for, because I don't think this is a, hey, look at the Patlabor kit. This is more of a look at the whole scene.
Exactly. Yeah. So off the get-go, and to tell you the truth, this is probably some of the funnest model building I've ever done to date, you know, is in building this diorama. And one of the reasons I had so much fun doing it is, and you're right, I've never done anything remotely like this before. I've never done a street. I've never done sidewalk. I've never done trees, right? This is my first time working with trees. And even like other accessories like a power pole, like that was so random to me. But I knew I wanted, like, I never thought I would spend like hours and hours and days like making a power pole out of like plow rods, right?
Yeah.
But I knew from the get-go, Patlabor is a Japanese thing. It needs to be in a Japanese world, right? And so I would boil it down. Once again, like whenever I build models or whenever I have a concept, I always like to boil it down to its quintessential elements, right? So what makes a Japanese street quintessentially Japanese, right? And so once again, I had this massive photo library of all these like Japanese street pictures, right?
Wow.
And the same things I would always see, or that I would appeal and identify as being Japanese, would be like the zebra lines, right, on the crosswalks, the power poles. And even in the Patlabor anime, you actually see tons of power poles and everything, like in, you know, those old school 80s, 90s animes, right? Or even now, you actually see them all the time. And in Japan, you see them all the time too, right? And pop machines, you see those everywhere, right?
Yeah, they're everywhere. Yeah.
Right?
The vending
and
machines,
like the green, exactly, right? The only thing that I wish I included that I didn't include in this is like, in Japan, they have these pebble raised orange parts in the sidewalk. And that's for like blind people to be able to feel where like they can walk along that and know where the sidewalk is. So that's the only thing I didn't include in this, which I felt like would have added a little bit more pop to the actual sidewalk. But you know, it's a small detail.
For sure.
Well, it's a big detail.
But I mean, in your mind, you still have your like, I didn't add it. By the way,
exactly,
just want to say hi to.
The only thing I wish I added here, right? But another thing, of course, is also the slow down Japanese. I think that says like slow down, a stop sign or whatever, like in front.
I don't read Japanese.
Yeah, I don't. I can't read it either. and then of course, like another quintessential thing, are later on you'll see is basically like Japanese people, right? Like Japanese the schoolgirls, right? Like you see them in their outfits, right?
Right, and, very Japanese.
Yeah. So I wanted to combine all of these, and I've seen a lot of pictures of, you know, green trees, but there was this one picture I fell upon, and it was like an autumn scene in Japan.
Right, yeah.
And I fell in love with that scene so much. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to be adding trees here, and I want to make it an autumn scene. It just kind of warms the whole site. And it's just not something that you see all the time. And I think it would be so nice to complement it with leaves spread across the road and the streets. And another reason why I chose Japanese streets too is because it's Japanese streets are super clean. Like, you know, I'm terrible at weathering, or at least I haven't tried that much weathering up to date, right? And so I was like, it's easy for me. Japanese streets so clean, right? Yeah. But one thing to note here, like aside, like you can see the pictures of me building the whole street, right? But one thing one detail I really liked is the patch of road that's repaired. Like that darker patch there.
Right.
Like that was another thing that I saw in Japan that was like, oh, it's so funny how everything's so clean. And you just see this dark patch that's just like, you know, there, right? And sewer cover and stuff. So those are some details that I really you
wanted to get down. Wow. Real quick. Hi, Kevin, who says, hey, Ryan, not Jess. Okay, Kevin, fuck you. And then we got Tony. One of my friends who says, hop on Tarky, my guy. I can't stop dying. Okay, Tony. I'll get on there soon. Strider Prime, good evening. Links,
Oh,
that's
Spider
Dad.
Prime. Hey.
Yeah, Mercenary's still here. Hey guys, thank you guys for being here. Seriously, awesome to have you guys listening to Ryan and his journey and his adventures through the hobby. But yeah, no, I didn't really think about that. I didn't really think about how you really did portray Japanese streets. Now, the viewers know that I'm not an anime guy as much as people think that I am. I'm not. I don't watch anime a lot at all. But you know, looking at your finished pictures now, I can definitely see that it's very very true to what Patlabor is, right? Which is what you, which is I think the whole essence of things. But I do remember, correct me if I'm wrong, that you mentioned how much fun you were having doing the part of the car.
Oh, I loved it. Yes, the car was so much fun. I've never painted a car before, and I was in a model store. It was like a train scale model store, and I was looking at all their cars, and I was like, which one could I modify to make, like, which one looks Japanese-ish, right?
Yeah.
And which one, because I knew I was gonna paint it as a police car, right? And then I found this one. This is a Mercedes. I forgot what type. But anyways, it's a Mercedes hatch, right? Yeah, it's a car, right? and I was like, hey, this could totally exist in the universe, and I could see this type of car because Japan's all about tiny cars, compact cars, and this one happened to be a highly detailed car that I don't think you're supposed to take it apart, but it was easy enough to take apart because I had this. I looked up some websites on modifying like Hot Wheel cars and stuff like that. And so,
that's a big thing.
I managed to take this apart, right? And I was like, this is perfect. This is going to work so well, right? So I basically sanded everything down, right? I put a little license plate in the front because I know I have to put a Japanese license plate there, right? And I made the police lights out of just like clear plastic rods, right? And I just pinned it on the top. After painted, then it looks obviously legit, right? Like an actual police cruiser, right? And especially with the decals. The decals actually came with the original. It's the Motoroid Patlabor kit. So and so that's how I knew. And also, once again, I chose a car based on the measurement of the decals too. Like once again, saying about modifying with decals in mind, right? And so that's exactly what I did here. I knew exactly where I wanted those decals. And so I made everything according to that. And then, this was so much fun. I've never painted a car before. It's definitely not like, this thing's like matted, right? It's not like pristine, shiny. Like I'm no pro at like car modeling, but anyways, this thing was so much fun. Like I just love transforming this car into a police cruiser. So
I remember your post on this. I think it was either the Instagram post or Facebook and Instagram where you because one of the things I've always enjoyed about your posts, and I've done myself now, or even like when I did my Sniper 2, is I always write a big old paragraph underneath whatever photo, and I focus on something, right? But I remember when you posted the car ones, you were just so you were very giddy, I guess, about how you worked with the car, and I think it came out awesome. The other thing that really caught my eye and I really enjoyed was the vending machines, and how they're just like really cute. That sounds right. Like, are these also from like a train modeling store?
Okay.
Or like,
great question. So so I made this Patlabor to be roughly 1/100 scale, right?
Right.
And so obviously I couldn't find, like, online you could find printouts of like pop machines and stuff like that.
Right.
But none of them were Japanese looking ones. They were all like Coca-Cola, like the standard ones we see in North America. And so these ones I happened to stumble upon when I was looking at papercraft. And so I saw this one, like there's tons of like papercraft of like traditional Japanese storefronts or houses or whatever. And so this one I bought purely just for the pop machines,
Oh,
and
okay.
So the way this one works is that you build that cardboard frame like in step one, and then you have to very carefully cut out the insert of where the pop is. But I wanted to modify this a little bit because it looked a little fake if it was just all just printed and just pasted over top like a like a gift or something. So I actually cut out the window and I put a plastic sheet in there, and then I scanned the original print and I cut it out again. So I inset it into it, so it looks like there's actually a plastic screen in front. So there's more of a
Wow.
3D look to it, right? And
Yeah.
then that was it. So that's actually made out of paper. So like a lot of people looking at it, they're like, "Whoa, where'd you get those vending machines?" And I was like, "Oh, it's like paper craft, right?" And then I
No
included
way.
that, but it's matte. I sprayed it with the same matte coat, so
Yeah.
everything is like the same kind of texture. But if you look
Yeah.
really close, you'll see kind of the pigments of the printing, right? But
Oh,
honestly,
for
like
sure. I
you
can
can't,
see the
you
bottles.
can't see.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, so the mod of
Wow.
it was what I thought was really cool, because when I made the vending machine, I was like, whoa, this looks so legit. Like you can see the
Yeah.
glare of the glass over top
Yes.
of
Yeah.
the even in the picture you can see in the shadows, right? Like it's kind of like set back a bit, right? So
Right.
anyway, so that was really fun making
Wow,
that.
Ryan. Wow. Well, and then we get obviously to the finished project.
Right.
Look, man, I say a lot of things, but like if you're ever looking to sell something, just let me know. I absolutely the thing is I absolutely love this just in general, like what you were able to do. I think I slowly start to understand why I like the modelers that I like and how they model things, right? Like my top favorite modelers that I have, because everybody has their heroes, right? And it goes, and I think I spoke about it with it's a Gundam, back when he was on the show the first time around, and I told him that everybody knows, and it's not a secret, that I love John Mayer, right? And but why do I like John Mayer when it comes to his music? And I know I'm getting a little off topic, but I just really, it goes to what I see here in this image. To me, when I was younger, a great guitarist was somebody who could shred, right? So like Kirk Hammett or Slash on the guitar. But then I learned that I started listening to jazz and blues and things like that, and I started to really fall in love with like B.B. King, who or even just like a Stevie Ray Vaughan, who can make one note cry really well. Very simple, just one note, but you can do so much with that one or two notes, right?
Yes.
And so it's that simplicity that they can add their touch to it that isn't overloaded, and it fits just right, like in my brain. And so
it's
when
like
I look
finesse,
yes, exactly. And John Mayer does the same thing in my mind. So when I look at your when I look at your kits and your projects, it's got that simplicity that isn't over the top or over like exaggerated. And so I think the kit that you've done it the most with, in my eyes, has been the Patlabor. And this isn't a snide, and I hope you know that, to the rest of your kits. I love them all.
For sure.
But this, I think, really exemplifies that. And then when you put it on that diorama, I think it just kind of makes a one scene whole, like. Anyway, that's my little gush. I wanted to say, I think it looks great. I don't know what you guys think. My friend says that he would smash your kit, as in like smash, as in like it's great, as in it's beautiful. So that's awesome. This is great, man. Honestly, what do you feel when you finish a kit? I'd love to kind of get an insight on what you feel when you take these pictures, because you have it in front of you, right? But when you post it for the world to see, and you're presenting like all these details that I'm going through right now, like even the little plate right in front of the Patlabor, like, is it a sense of like, I made this, or what exactly are you feeling?
Right after I finish a kit, I just spend probably, I don't know, a long time just staring at it. And to tell you the truth, actually, after I complete each component, I just love to look at it, and then I combine it together, and I just like to look at it as a whole. And as I'm looking through the piece, it sounds, I don't know, very corny, but I just think about it like plays in my mind, the steps that I went through to achieve it, to build it, and to paint it, and to and I look at I don't know, it's just it's really it gets pretty emotional sometimes, because I'm like, wow, I can't believe, you're right. Like sometimes I look at it, I'm like, I can't believe I made this. Like this is I'm pretty blown away. Not that I'm like, whoa, I made this, I'm amazing.
No.
It just looks like it's like a sigh of relief that I'm done, and I persevered through it, because it did take a long time and a lot of work, and but there's an incredible sense of fulfillment when I look at it, and a incredible sense of accomplishment. Like a lot of times, I set into some projects where I think in my mind, I'm like, I have no idea how I'm going to do this, but I'm just going to take it a step at a time, and we'll see how it goes, right?
Right.
And so when it's done, when I see it, I'm just like, wow, this is so cool. Like I love this collage here with the original to the custom.
Yeah.
Because then you really see the morphing of kind of the style choices that I made, right? And
Right.
everything from even the height of the shoulders. I remember really struggling how high to put the shoulders or how low to put the shoulders. And I really like, I'm so glad I ended up with this height of the shoulder, because I feel like it just gave it an extra presence. Like I don't know, like or little things, or even like the knee armor detail, like that was from like a Wing Gundam or something like that.
Yeah, it looks like the wing.
Yeah, and I'm so glad I added that too, because it just adds, it flows so well with the rest of the leg. And so little details like that. And the crotch armor is actually from like an RG Exia or something like that, or some type of Exia unit.
It's like a double O kit because of that skinny.
Yeah, double O,
plate.
exactly. It was like the double O, and it was like the front crotch and the rear crotch armor combined into one.
Oh wow, really? Okay.
Yeah, and I really like that touch, because it was a last minute detail where I was like, I want to put a license plate on the crotch area, and I'm so glad I did it, because I was like, wow, like that really makes it look paired with the vehicle. Yeah. Right. And so that was another detail I really, so those are the things that I look at. I think about the choices that I made and whether or not they were the right or the wrong choices. And like I said, it looks like I just did it really quickly and easily, but like I said, 90% of it is in the planning of it, and in trying out different things, and then 10% is the execution. So it's a lot of like thinking. And so at the end of a build, I'm just very joyful.
Yeah. Well, here are the last couple of pictures of the finished Dio. We have the Japanese people walking around. We have the police line at cross. I really love the texture on the road. Right? Like you can see it from here, like from this angle, you can see the little kind of concrete.
Yes. And that's sandpaper. That's painted on sandpaper.
What?
Yeah. So sandpaper of different grits actually is like the best and perfect texture for roads, for paved roads.
No way.
And so the grittier the sandpaper, then the bigger the scale is. The finer the sandpaper, the smaller the scale is, right? So it's really interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Damn, okay. Oh, and then this one, just the scale, and you putting like the little and the trees, man. That tree came out just wow. And then the pole, the pole that you you were talking about.
The pole I spent so much time on, and I was so proud of the pole as well too, with the orange kind of lamp popping out.
Yeah,
it's also
dude.
Very characteristically Japanese, and they have tons of really, really tall power poles there. And so that pole, the one thing that was the hardest in this whole Dio was figuring out how I can have those wires suspended and to make it look like it's cut right there. And so I used like a really thin jewelry wire, like metal wire, that was super strong and held its own weight. And and I had this clear plastic actually that made it on the other end to make it look like it was perfectly separated. And anyways,
it
was a challenge, but
wow. Well, this is awesome stuff. Like, okay guys, so originally Ryan sent me, I think it was
five builds, I think.
Five builds. We went to 3. There are 2 other ones that are missing. Him and I chatted. I actually have the other one like ready to present, but and in fact I'll just show it here. It's the Arrival, the PG Astray, but we're not going to get into it this time around. We actually talked about what we'll do with that later, because believe it or not, it's been 2 hours. It's been 2 hours.
Wow.
I'm gonna switch over to the cameras only, and wow, Ryan, like I honestly don't know what to say. A lot of times in my interviewing skills, I get scared because I feel like when I talk to like the people that I admire, Like I just there's like I try to find criticism. I try to find something that I can help with. Not that you're asking for it, but I can't. And I think I speak for everybody. You're an amazing builder, and you're always pushing that forward. And I think you're the quintessential, a word that you used a lot this time around, quintessential example of what a builder should be. And I really thank you for sharing all of this with us. I know that in the future we'll have you back on. But I want to thank you again for like really just I can never stop or feel, you know, bored of listening to you, because the way that you explain things is awesome. So is there anything that you'd like to share or say?
Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I really enjoyed this opportunity to kind of explain. I'm always open to you know, helping and teaching whatever I know. And I don't know everything, but I try to, like, I can find out maybe.
Yeah.
But feel free to message me on Instagram. That's usually where I'm most active on. And but yeah, I just love this hobby, and I love it. I love to see when others can enjoy it as well too. And so yeah, I think thanks for this opportunity, Jess, to kind of
For sure. No.
And I really appreciate always chatting with you about it. So yeah, thanks a lot.
You're always welcome here. Well, guys, with that, we're gonna go, and I guess we'll see you guys next week. Well, Ryan won't be here, but I'll be with the guys. We're gonna be doing a group build over at Derek's house again. So be sure to tune in for that and hear all of our stupid things that we're talking about. Ryan, one more time, thank you so much, guys. I'm gonna leave you guys with the end screen with some music, and I'm gonna go talk to Ryan for a little bit. I'll see you guys in a bit.
See you.